Very good afternoon to all of you, and I take this opportunity to thank Honorable Vice Chancellor Jamia Hamdard, Mr. Moses of Global Dialogue Forum, my panelists, Chair Mr. Javed Ansari, my co-panelists here for their patience and being here to listen to all of us. I know all of you are dead tired and I am worried about students because वो लगता है उनको कि कब घंटा बजे और कब भागे, because many of you would have been told कि बैठे रहना उठना नहीं attendance लगेगी, so I can understand that. So I'm not going to take much of your time because lunch is also there. But I'll start with one very important point. What I see in the concept note is about the diversity and conformity by Global Dialogue Forum, which says that this is a time where we need to look at certain contradictions and to resolve those contradictions. Now, this raises a question, a very important question. You know what we talk about, diversity and conformity defining India. Yes, diversity has been in our DNA. You know, we have been talking about diversity and we have been celebrating. India is the largest democracy. India is a country where we have more than 122 languages, more than, there are, if we look at the list of tribes, it is more, the number goes above 698. So, the diversity, the religious diversity, the linguistic diversity is there. And these days we all take pride in saying that we belong to a multicultural society. And multiculturalism is something which makes us also global citizens. And we take pride in our multiculturalism, and why we should not take pride. Because if we look at, in your schools, all of you must have read in your NCERT books, unity in diversity. So that concept, what is challenging our unity? It's not the diversity which is challenging our unity. It is the practice of diversity and the politicization of the identity which is very important to understand. This question of preserving diversity, nurturing diversity was bothering the framers of the Constitution, whether it be Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Dr. Ambedkar. They were all worried, and they were all worried because after partition they had this high responsibility to see that diversities are nurtured, they are preserved, and because they are, what India is. You cannot imagine India without its Ganga Yamuni Tehzeeb and how different cultures have contributed into this diverse mosaic, the culture which we are so proud. हम सबको दिवाली की मिठाई खाना अच्छा लगता है, होली मनाना अच्छा लगता है, ईद की सेवई खाना अच्छा लगता है. आप अपने अंदर झांक के देखिए और कितना अच्छा लगता है, कितने मीठे होते हैं ये रिश्ते. But what is happening? We look at our constitution, and I'm not expert on constitution, I'm a sociologist, so I'll speak from that gaze. I have grown up in a childhood where we used to live in very mixed localities, and all these festivals, Christmas used to be our favorite festival because you would get cake, you will get gifts, and all these and they would bring enrichment to our life. So this diversity which has been enshrined in our constitution, and constitution is the holiest book, we the people of India, that is the book which is guaranteeing us this freedom, and that freedom has been given to us in forms of fundamental rights, in forms of directive principles, in forms of minority rights. Now what happens to it is, if we look at this 77 years of journey of the India's independence, we see that there has been certain conscious mistakes, and there has been some unconscious mistakes which have kind of created the polarization, the heightened tension we are experiencing now. Because that is the question. Ye sawal hamare samne hai ki how to deal with this polarization, and violence, my friends, is not something that it will affect one community. Violence is something which affects everyone, because violence is a vicious circle. It comes back to you. It it comes back to you in a different form, because it brings in insecurity, it brings in fear in the society. So the culture of fear and insecurity in the society is something which is very important to address. And what our previous panelists were saying, that we are leaving a very big responsibility on this young generation, but I think we also have an onus on ourselves that we initiate and we usher them into a social harmonious society. So, friends, if we look at the Constitution, we have rights, minority rights, to look at to preserve the diversity, to give them right to propagate their religion, to teach in their language. But how it has been shaped is the question. We have also adopted for legal pluralism, and that legal pluralism is that customary laws will decide about marriage, inheritance, adoption. So when India adopted legal pluralism, India adopted legal pluralism with this concern that this will help us to nurture plurality, diversity. India ने legal pluralism contestation के लिए नहीं adopt किया था, बहुत सोच समझ के adopt किया था, but what happened is that we see now what happens is with this question of identity and how the politicization of identity takes place becomes we have linguistic diversity, and we have seen that how harmoniously state reorganizations have done, and we have accommodated English and with English other languages. जब लोगों को साउथ में ये दिक्कत थी कि नहीं हिंदी में हम क्यों अपना कम्युनिकेशन करें, तो अंग्रेजी के लिए भी बनाया गया, and with that many other languages have been, if you look at the 8th schedule, there are many languages which are there now. Now, you see this accommodative nature, this assimilative nature is very much in the Constitution, is there. But what happens is, why then there is a contestation? ये सवाल आएगा कि भी क्यों contestation है? Now, the contestation is, if we look at the mistakes the governments have made. Now, what has happened is, if we look at the journey from 1947 till 1965, we find that there was so much of concern about the development issues. Nehru's first and second plan are plans which are talking about development, and development politics was important because India wanted, and everybody was a participant in that development. But what we see is the change which is happening is because of the way we have, even Nehru, if you read the Constituent Assembly debates, and I'm sure many of you would be reading, that how Nehru talked about secularism and how the fear in the mind of Nehru. He said that, my soft corner towards Muslims is being read as minority appeasement. It is not minority appeasement. I'm trying to give them that kind of confidence. But, it is now, after Nehru, how this sentiment of minority appeasement was played is very well evident from the case of Shaban, which was a major mistake. This is again very important thing that we have to look into it, that now to cover up that mistake, there was another mistake, that opening up of the locks of the Ramlala temple. So that was another mistake which happened. It is not only Shaban, I would say what happened to Roop cover, because this is also a very, very important question, a very valid question, because there is this general understanding that individual rights have to be protected, and individual rights, because this whole idea about legal pluralism was that the collective, the community will ensure the individual rights. But then there were stages in Indian political system when the individual rights were not protected by the communities. And then this was a time when there was this discontentment. So this discontentment, what the Ambassador Ghanshyam was talking about, the discontentment with democracy. Now, why was this discontentment with the democracy? Discontentment with the democracy was because of the decay of the democratic institutions, that is legislature, executive and judiciary, and which we see now, media of course is there. So we see that now these agencies which were the watchdog of democracy have been decayed. And Atul Kohli in his, I think all of you should read, students of law should read Decay of Democratic Institutions by Atul Kohli. It's a very old book, but at that time he could predict, Gurpreet Mahajan has mentioned in her book Preserving Diversity कि 1980 में लोग बात करते थे कि अगर हिंदुस्तान अपनी इस sensitive nerve को नहीं संभालेगा तो there are chances of fragmentations. But I still have a very deep faith in the constitution and the democracy that we are surviving, and I'm sure these are the phases and we would survive. Now the Indian experiences with this unity and diversity, with these provisions which had been enshrined in our constitutions have been very problematic, because it is, once we start politicizing identity, and Rajni Kothari has talked about it, you see communal tensions were there and we inherited. ये हमने inherit किया था 1947 में, बहुत कोशिश की गई सब तरफ से, सब communities ने ये कोशिश की कि communal violence शायद partition के साथ ख़त्म हो जाएगा. 1965 तक हमको ये एहसास भी रहा कि communal violence will, but then again we see this, occurring. But you see the DNA of communal violence changing from 1965 in 1980s, with 1984, with Malyana, with Meerut, with 1984 riots. So Rajni Kothari says that it is a new phase of communalism where these agencies of state become the party. So it becomes a very contesting question. That यहाँ पे आके जो जब state, which is protector, which is guardian of our constitution, when it becomes party, then it becomes a very difficult situation for minorities, whether it is Sikhs, whether it is Muslims, whether it is Christians, whether it is Dalits. So now is the stage where we see majoritarianism, and it is a global phenomena. But what has been pointed out, that the civil society has to play a very important role. What has happened, we see that, I'm sorry, Mr. Ganai, I will differ with you here when you said sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka vishwas or sabka prayas. Sabka prayas ab juda hai, when we were talking about this women reservation bill, which is again, I find a blank, it's a post-dated check which has been handed over to women कि 29 में जाके आएगा और उस तक delimitation होगा, census होगा, उसका कुछ पता नहीं है. Because why this happened precisely because if we look at UP election, women are the major constituency. They have become the voters. Women have become aware. वो चाहे politics में हिस्सेदारी उनकी election लड़ने में हो ना हो, but they have become voters, and this is very much there. And this has come after a very deep researches. This government does not do anything without, they know that women is a potential constituency. So this has come. But it's like a post-dated check, friends, because if you see sabka saath, sabka vikas, so why hijab ban in Karnataka? Beti padhao, beti bachao ko kya hoga? Because that is what is very important. So, it is very important that these we have to see the sensitivity. If we really want to empower women, so we have to create those structures. What we are doing, that we are curtailing, we are, suffocating those structures which are there. So even the way, now Shabano case was something which, Muslim community was blamed for it. कि भाई वो लोगों ने oppose किया, उसको वापस लिया, they don't want reform. But what happened to criminalization of triple talaq? Is criminalization of triple talaq solution to Muslim women's emancipation? क्या उसका husband 3 साल बाद आके उसको वापस लेगा जिसने उसको डाइवोर्स दे दिया? आई थिंक इट शुड हैव बीन कि कुछ उसको मेंटेनेंस के रूप में दिया जाए, कुछ उसके ऊपर फाइनेंशियल पेनल्टी लगती, तो शायद इस समस्या का हल होता. एंड स्टेट वुड हैव क्लेम दैट वी हैव emancipated Muslim women. So this is very important. We need to have both such researches where we need to look at, and what, when this issue of cow protection bill, it's very old debate, और इसका solution गांधी और नेहरू ने दिया था dialogue. Let us dialogue and tell each other, what we have done with this environment of fear and insecurity. We see ghettos coming up. Jaffer Lett is talking about ghettos. He has done research on Abul Fazl, Ahmedabad, name it any city in Delhi. Thomas Haynes, उनकी आप अगर research पढ़िए तो आप देखिए अबुल फजल जहाँ मैं रहती हूँ वो एक गेटो है, शाहीन बाग एक गेटो माना जाता है, आपका निज़ामुद्दीन गेटेड कम्युनिटी है वो भी गेटो माना जाता है, सीलमपुर. एंड पोस्ट 1984 इट इज़ अ यूनिवर्सल tendency 1984 के बाद पूरा West Delhi from Jail Road to Rajouri Garden is a Sikh ghetto. So what have we done? What have we done? We have curtailed the chances of interaction. मैं जिस environment में बचपन में बड़ी हुई, मेरे साथ सब लोग रहते थे, and I have learned and I respect and I celebrate. I celebrate all the festivals because the richness which it brings is very important. So, these are structural attacks which are being happening. And how do we address this question is very important.
I need to point out, I'm scared of actually interrupting you because I have to go home. She's my wife's one of her very close friends. And I still must.
I'll wind up. I'll wind up. I honor you. I'll wind up. But I'll wind up with the point that, this is a phase. And especially for young generation, this is a phase. This will pass away. This will pass away if we make our judicious choices and we go back to our syncretic culture. We go back to our composite culture and see what are the best practices. And civil society, the social cohesion, Hindustan बहुत मजबूत है, उसमें बहुत, when COVID happened. COVID is an example from where you can learn कि किस तरह से Muslims Hindu ritual, death rituals कर रहे थे और Hindus were performing, जनाजे की नमाज. मेरा एक student आशुतोष, मैं उसको इतना admire करती हूँ, जब कोई बाहर नहीं निकल रहा था, जामिया की एक teacher की death हुई, he was the person जिसने जाके जनाजे की नमाज अदा की and burial ritual. So, we have these examples and we should emphasize on these examples. There is lot of hope and scope for synthesis. Thank you very much.